Ever since the passing of my parents during my medical school years, I've had to fend for myself. This compelled me to be self-reliant and determined as I aimed to build a future that would make me proud. After years of relentless hard work, frugality, and saving every penny I could, I finally achieved a significant milestone. I purchased a townhouse. This wasn't just any townhouse. It was the physical representation of my efforts and achievements, situated in a pleasant neighborhood and overlooking a lively kindergarten. One typical morning, as I picked up my usual coffee from the corner cafe, where the bee knew my order by heart, I encountered an unexpected turn of events. Absorbed in thoughts about my upcoming hospital shift, I accidentally bumped into a stranger, causing my coffee to spill over both of us. "Jesus, watch where you're going," the man exclaimed, visibly annoyed as he surveyed his coffee-stained shirt. Flushing with embarrassment, I apologized profusely. "Oh my God, I am so sorry." "Here, let me help you clean that up," I stammered, rummaging through my bag only to find I had no napkins. "It's all right, no harm done," he sighed, shaking his head but easing up as he saw my flustered expression. "But I doubt these stains will just wipe off with a napkin." "You're right, I'm terribly sorry. There's a laundromat around the corner. I can cover the cleaning costs. It's the least I can do," I offered. Raising an eyebrow, a small, amused smirk appeared on his lips. "Lead the way then, coffee spiller." As we made our way to the laundromat, our initial awkwardness gradually melted into a more relaxed conversation. He introduced himself as Jacob, a broker new to the area. "What about you? I haven't seen you around before," he asked as we handed his shirt to the laundromat attendant. "I'm Chloe," I responded. "I live just a few blocks from here. Usually, I'm either at the hospital or resting at home, so I'm not much of a social butterfly." We decided to sit at a nearby diner while waiting for his shirt. Over a couple of carefully distanced coffees, we discussed everyday topics like work and the neighborhood. It was refreshingly simple and straightforward. "Look, Chloe," he said as we collected his now stain-free shirt, "I owe you one for helping me out. Let me take you out to dinner, my treat. No more coffee disasters, I promise." I hesitated briefly. He seemed sincere, and considering the morning's mishap, I felt a night out might be just what I needed. "All right, Jacob, it's a deal. But if this is some elaborate scheme to get free medical advice, you'll be disappointed." "Don't worry, I'll try to keep it strictly non-medical," he chuckled. "How's Friday night?" I asked. "Friday works." "It's a date then," I replied, handing him his shirt. We exchanged numbers, and as he walked away, I couldn't help but feel that this unexpected encounter might just be the beginning of something good. From that accidental coffee spill and the subsequent shirt rescue mission, Jacob and I started seeing each other more frequently. It all began with that promised dinner, which turned out to be a delightful evening. It was a magical evening at our favorite Italian restaurant in town, a spot Jacob had passionately recommended as the top choice around. Conversing with Jacob was effortless. Despite his day job in real estate, he was surprisingly knowledgeable on diverse topics. As the night came to a close, a mischievous spark in his eyes, he playfully asked, "So, life-changing enough for you?" I couldn't help but laugh and nod. "You've won this round," I admitted, still savoring the exceptional pasta. From that night forward, Jacob and I became virtually inseparable. He was always crafting fun plans for us, whether it was a cozy movie night, exploring a local art exhibition, or just leisurely strolling through the park. Jacob had a unique way of turning ordinary days into memorable adventures. One evening, while we were walking by the river and admiring the city lights shimmering on the water, he paused, turned to me with his sincere eyes, and said, "Chloe, I've got something to tell you." My heart raced with both excitement and nervousness. "What's up?" I asked. "I'm falling pretty hard for you," he confessed, his tone earnest. "And I don't want to scare you, but I think this could be something real." I took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air. "I'm falling too, Jacob. And no, you're not scaring me off." A few months into our whirlwind romance, during a cozy dinner at my place, with Jacob proving his culinary prowess to challenge the memorable pasta of our first date, he surprised me with a proposal that left me speechless. He had just served some delicious lasagna and, taking my hands in his, he asked, "Chloe, I know things have moved quickly between us, but when you just know. Marry me?" I didn't hesitate. It felt utterly right. "Yes, Jacob, yes, I will marry you." We spent the rest of the night talking about our future, finding a place together, and starting a family. Everything seemed perfect, and I couldn't recall the last time I had been this joyful. However, the unexpected return of Jacob's parents from Thailand, just before our wedding, introduced a change I hadn't foreseen. They had spent many years living abroad, but decided to come back for good upon learning about their son's upcoming wedding. Initially, they were incredibly warm and welcoming. "We're so thrilled to finally meet the woman who has captured our Jacob's heart," his mother exclaimed with a warm squeeze of my hands. His father, a man with a robust laugh, patted Jacob on the back. "You've chosen well, son. We're excited to be part of this joyous occasion." Their initial warmth was reassuring, and I was optimistic about our new family dynamics. However, this initial friendliness soon shifted towards becoming overly intrusive. Delilah, Jacob's mother, began treating our home as though it was her own, with her husband Jackson quickly following suit. It started with small, seemingly innocuous actions. Delilah took to rearranging my kitchen almost daily. "Chloe, you really should keep the spices near the stove. It saves time," she would insist, moving things around without waiting for my response. In my efforts to keep harmony, I often found myself biting my tongue. One afternoon, while trying to unwind with a book, Delilah settled beside me and remarked, "Dear, a little more dusting and some fresh flowers would really make this place less gloomy." Jackson, on the other hand, had a knack for interrupting. He shadowed Jacob, critiquing his work decisions and how we managed our finances. Once, I accidentally overheard Jackson in the garage, his tone severe. "You're letting her handle the money? You need to watch that, son, and ensure it's spent wisely." Their constant meddling was overwhelming, but the final straw was when Delilah unilaterally decided to throw a party for her friends at our house without consulting us. She downplayed it. "It's just a small get-together," as if it were nothing significant. When I sought Jacob's support, he simply said, "Mom loves hosting. Let her have this one. It makes her happy, and it's not a big deal, right?" Reluctantly, I agreed. However, this small gathering turned into a lavish affair with over 20 guests, all from Delilah's social circle, turning my living room into a weekly club venue. I spent the entire day preparing food, only to feel like an outsider in my own party. Delilah paraded me around as if she were the host, and I merely her helper. "Chloe helped out," she would say, patting my arm, while her friends merely nodded and quickly resumed their conversations with her. The evening reached its boiling point when one of her loud friends complimented Delilah. "You've really whipped this place into shape. Jacob was smart to bring you back here." Frustration and humiliation surged through me. After the guests left, I confronted Jacob. "This can't happen again. It's not okay, and you know it." He looked weary and admitted, "I know, it's just, Mom can be a lot. But what can I do? She's my mom." My response was tinged with hurt, "But I'm your wife. That should count for something, shouldn't it?" He had no reply, and I spent the night awake, dreading that this disregard for my boundaries would define my future. Week after week, my home became the venue for Delilah's endless social gatherings. Each event, with its noise and disregard for our space, left me feeling more alienated. Eventually, I reached my limit. One day, I firmly told Delilah, "I'm sorry, but we can't host these parties every Saturday. It's just too much." Her shock was immediate, her response fiery. "Too much? You ungrateful girl. This is what family does for each other." But I knew I had to stand my ground for the sake of my own well-being. We provide hospitality and entertainment, and we support each other. As Delilah spoke, her voice grew louder with each declaration, making the walls of my home feel as though they were closing in on me. "Delilah, please lower your voice. Let's discuss this calmly." However, calmness was clearly not on her agenda. Her face flushed a deep red, a hue so intense it reminded me of dramatic scenes from films. She began to pace, her arms waving frantically, and then, to my horror, she started tossing decorative pillows across the room as if they were stand-ins for my face. "You need to listen," she yelled. "If you don't agree to these small favors, I can make life extremely difficult for you." Her voice was loud now, cutting through the friendly facade we had maintained. When she threatened to push her son to divorce me if I didn't agree, a chill ran through me. "Jacob will side with me. He always does. Don't fool yourself into thinking he'll choose you over his own mother." I was staggered. She was using the threat of divorce as leverage to control me, revealing just how much Jacob was still influenced by his mother. It felt like a physical blow. At that moment, Jacob, hearing the noise, rushed into the room. "Mom, what's going on here?" He was visibly confused, looking back and forth between his angry mother and me. "Your wife is being unreasonable, Jacob. I'm simply asking for a bit of cooperation, and she's denying it," his mother insisted. Jacob looked at me, his eyes pleading for a resolution. "Chloe, can't we just," he started. "No, Jacob, we can't," I interrupted, my voice stronger than I felt. "This isn't about a party. It's about respect and boundaries. Your mother just threatened to tear us apart." Shock passed over Jacob's face. Then he turned to his mother. "Mom, you didn't," he said, his voice full of disbelief. "I did, and I will if she doesn't start showing some respect around here," Delilah replied firmly, ready for a confrontation. She then turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Taking a deep breath, I made a radical decision. "Jacob, I think we need to separate. Not genuinely, just on paper. We need to show your mother that our decisions are ours alone, not made under her pressure." It took a lot of convincing, many tearful talks, and sincere promises that this was just a strategy, not the end for us. So, we quietly filed for a divorce, a feint to claim our independence. It was the most difficult decision of my life, pretending to leave the man I loved to safeguard our marriage from the oppressive hold of his mother. The next Saturday, as Delilah and her group of friends arrived at our house for their usual social gathering, they were met with an unexpected scene. I was standing firm on the front porch, my posture resolute, my determination clear. As Delilah got out of her car and noticed me standing alone, her smile vanished. "Chloe, dear, aren't you going to let us in? We have our little gathering, remember?" she said, her voice still authoritative. "No, Delilah, there won't be any gathering here today or ever again," I replied calmly but firmly. She looked puzzled and narrowed her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "This is my son's house, and I decide." "It was your son's house," I corrected her sharply, cutting her off. "And as of last week, it's mine alone." Delilah and Jacob have parted ways. Jacob no longer resides here and will not be participating in these social events anymore. Delilah's face registered shock and disbelief as she struggled to accept the news. She insisted this must be a mistake, claiming Jacob would never agree to such a thing. But the truth was, Jacob had agreed, and I was firm in my resolve, no longer willing to be overshadowed by her presence. Feeling a rush of empowerment from standing my ground, I could sense the shift in control. Delilah, visibly upset, declared the situation ridiculous and made a frantic attempt to call Jacob. Her hands trembled as she dialed, and when Jacob confirmed the news, her expression darkened with each word he spoke. Turning back to me, Delilah accused me of tearing the family apart, but I stood firm, aware of the necessity of my actions. I told her I was putting an end to the turmoil she brought into my life weekly. This was my home, and I would no longer facilitate her gatherings. The other women present, who had been watching intently, began to whisper among themselves, sensing the gravity of the situation. With a dramatic turn, Delilah left, her entourage in tow, leaving behind a palpable silence and a cloud of dust from their swift departure. Following our public separation, Jacob and I continued to see each other discreetly, meeting in unassuming places to maintain some semblance of normalcy. It was a surreal situation, reminiscent of teenage secrecy, and carried its share of pain and necessity. On a cool evening, Jacob texted me to meet at the Old Town Diner, a place with a nostalgic feel and a broken neon sign, away from prying eyes. Filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, I made my way there, careful to avoid familiar faces. As I sat across from Jacob in the diner, I noticed the weariness etched into his features. We exchanged quiet greetings, each expressing how much we missed the other. Jacob shared how difficult it had been, not being able to come home, dealing with his mother's overpowering nature. We discussed the importance of our current distance, hoping it would help Delilah realize the necessity of our space. Despite the challenges, we acknowledged the need to persevere. As we talked, the waitress brought over coffee and fries, and we paused our conversation, grateful for the momentary distraction. Once alone again, we continued, discussing the loneliness of the house without each other's presence, yet appreciating the peace it brought. The evening unfolded with a quiet, bittersweet intimacy, a stark contrast to the chaos we had left behind. "Chloe, I've been reflecting," Jacob began, snapping a fry in three. "Perhaps it's time we searched for a new place, somewhere we can start anew, away from the current turmoil." The thought was both exciting and intimidating. "I like the idea, but what about our finances and this house?" I questioned. "We'll manage," he replied with assurance. "I'll handle the house details, perhaps even speak with a broker about selling it. As for finances, we've always worked well together on that front." "That's true," I concurred, a flicker of hope igniting within me at the prospect of a fresh start just for us. "Let's do it. Let's find a place that's truly ours." We spent the next hour discussing potential neighborhoods, the kind of home we'd like, and our decorating plans. Dreaming together and planning our future felt uplifting, a contrast to the past few months. When it was time to leave the diner, the cool air made me shiver. Jacob took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. "I've got you," he murmured, drawing me into a warm embrace. "I know," I whispered back, clinging to him. "And I've got you." That night, we parted with a plan and our spirits buoyed by the promise of a new beginning. It wouldn't be easy, but with Jacob by my side, I was confident we could face anything, even Delilah. A year later, our efforts bore fruit. I had saved enough money, and Jacob, utilizing his real estate expertise, secured us a splendid house in a fantastic area with a beautiful garden. To commemorate and solidify our renewed commitment, we opted for a quiet re-wedding with a few close friends privy to our journey. As we reaffirmed our vows, the burdens of the previous year seemed to dissolve. Eventually, we needed to retrieve a few last items from our former townhouse. One Saturday morning, we drove there, only to find Delilah and Jackson waiting at the front door. Delilah's face beamed unnervingly as we approached. "We need to talk about family gatherings. Now that you're back, we can start planning the next one right here," she exclaimed eagerly. Jacob's expression darkened. "Mom, we're not staying. We're just here to pick up some things. We've moved out." Her smile briefly wavered, but then returned. "Moved out? Oh, then this place is free for parties." A twinge of irritation surged within me, but I maintained my composure. "Delilah, we've sold the townhouse. It's no longer ours. We're here to collect our last belongings." It took a moment for the reality to hit her, and her expression shifted from confusion to dismay. "Sold? But where will you live? Where will the—" At a recent family gathering, Jacob took a decisive step forward, his voice steady and resolute. "Mom, the townhouse is no longer our concern, and we won't be sharing our new address. I regret the way things unfolded previously, but we're embracing a new beginning. It's perhaps time for you and Dad to rediscover your passion for travel, like you used to." Delilah, previously bubbling with excitement, was visibly taken aback. Her mouth moved as if to speak, but no words came out. Jackson, who had been silently watching the conversation, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, which she quickly shrugged off, her eyes locked onto Jacob. "You're choosing her over your own family?" Delilah's voice trembled with a blend of anger and pain. "Yes, Mom. I am choosing my wife," Jacob responded firmly. "It's not about taking sides. It's about honoring our life together." Before Delilah could respond, Jacob gently kissed my hands, reaffirming his commitment in front of his parents. Delilah stood still, her expression a mix of frustration and disbelief. Jackson seemed to understand that the argument was settled and slowly guided her back to their car. After moving into our new home, the tranquility I had longed for seemed within reach. Jacob and I cherished our newfound privacy and the freedom that accompanied it. However, Delilah DS in a desperate attempt to discover our whereabouts. Thankfully, our friends respected our privacy, keeping our address confidential and supporting our decision to maintain our privacy. Delilah's frustration mounted with every failed attempt to reach us, and she began to confront us more directly. The phone calls became more frequent and intrusive. From the outset, Jacob and I agreed that responding to her would only fuel her actions, so we chose to ignore the calls. This only infuriated her further, driving her to take more drastic measures. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at the hospital, I was heading to my car when I saw Delilah waiting in the staff parking lot. My heart sank. As I approached, her expression was one of anger and resolve. "Chloe, you can't ignore me forever. Tell me where you live," she demanded, her tone sharp. Keeping my distance, I warned her, "Delilah, this has to stop. You're not welcome here, and you're certainly not welcome in our lives if this continues." She scoffed and stepped closer, her presence more intimidating. "You think you can just shut me out? Jacob is my son. I have rights." My patience thinned, and my concern for my safety grew. "If you don't leave now, I'm calling security. This is harassment, Delilah." Her eyes narrowed, disbelieving I would take a stand. Without another word, I pulled out my phone and dialed security. Within minutes, a security officer arrived, and I quickly explained the situation. Delilah was still ranting as the officer approached. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises now. You are causing a disturbance," the officer said firmly. With the officer's presence, reality seemed to dawn on Delilah. Her face flushed with anger, but she hesitated, glancing between me and the officer. "This isn't the end," she muttered, though her voice lacked conviction as she turned and walked away. After the incident, I warned her that any further approaches would lead me to involve the police and press charges for harassment. It seemed my firm stance had an impact. Delilah's attempts to contact us ceased abruptly. Weeks later, we were relieved to hear from a mutual friend that Delilah and Jackson had decided to move back to Thailand permanently. The news brought profound relief, lifting the final cloud over our new life, allowing us to truly start afresh.